Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. And today we'll help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions around the Delta surge and the return to the office. There are unfortunately way too many leaders who are denying reality regarding the Delta surge, the return to the office, who are making some pretty bad decisions around this topic. Now, there's so many leaders who are pushing for a normal office return, like it's a normal situation, like the vaccines have solved everything, like we can all go back to the office and we're completely safe despite the Delta surge. But the Delta surge is much, much more problematic than they depict. Our cases here in the United States, in some states, are worse than they have ever been. In Florida, it's the highest cases they have ever been throughout the pandemic. And it might not be a surprise if we, across the United States as a whole, reach our highest caseload throughout the pandemic. This is a big problem. Delta is way more infectious than previous COVID variants, and vaccine immunity is not very good against Delta. We have extensive evidence that vaccine immunity fades seriously and significantly. For example, Pfizer was the inoculation of choice by Israel for its population of something of over 10 million people, and they got it done really fast. December, January, March, so February, they got that done really fast. So then they have studies, and then they have an outbreak. So they have an outbreak of the Delta surge, just like we have in the United States, and they found that 6 months after the Pfizer vaccine, combined with the strength of Delta, vaccine immunity of Pfizer goes down to 39% for infectious disease. So someone with symptoms, someone who can easily get others infected. Not as bad for hospitalization, but still pretty bad. So the vaccine immunity goes way down. That makes vaccines not such a good protection against Delta, to make it seem like, oh, everything's good, normal, we'll go back to the office now. And cases are slated to peak in sometime in mid to late fall in the United States. This is a serious issue. But so many companies are not changing their policies. They're still going back to the office saying, we're going back to the office, we're going back to the office. AIG, the insurance company, is saying, we'll go back to the office in September. Now, some companies, and other companies as well, some companies are saying, well, we'll change our policy. So for example, we had the Delta cases starting to go up from mid-late June here in the United States, and they were really starting to surge in early July. So Apple was saying for a long time that they'll go back to the office in September, and as cases were surging, as it became clearly that it's really bad, in July 24th, around July 24th, they said, okay, clearly it's a bad idea. We won't go back to the office in September. We will go back to the office in October. They wanted to hit the real peak, mid-late fall, when they're really going to be surging. Obviously a bad idea, bad planning by the leadership. But the Apple leadership is really, really pushing for a return to the office. They want to do that, and they're making some pretty terrible decisions in doing so. Only recently, so the July 24th with all the cases, on August 23rd, they said, okay, clearly we screwed up that time. Anyway, they had a lot of employees resign because of clearly bad decision making by the leadership. And they said on August 23rd that they'll go back to the office in January. Yeah, really, the Apple is one of the largest, if not the largest company, something like $2 trillion in the world. And they made a decision that cost them many, many, many billions of dollars. And top employees lost, having to change their plans all around, serious employee morale hit. That is a bad problem. And so many companies are going through that same process. Also, other variants are coming up on the tail. If you think it's the Delta that's going to surge in mid-late fall, what will happen after? We know that other variants like Delta Plus might be well around the corner. Delta Plus is present in the Bay Area and 11 other countries and around the United States. It's spreading, and it looks like it's just as infectious as Delta, but more capable of escaping our vaccines. So not good news. And there are, again, other variants that are coming up down the road. So that's why we're seeing employees strongly resist going back to the office. Already, 33% complied with the return order, and this is of all the people who can work remotely, of course, which is about 50% of the US population. But we also know that about 50% indicated that they will quit if they don't get their work preferences met by their employees. 25 to 33%, so a quarter to a third, want to work full-time remotely. More than 50% want a hybrid schedule. Only something like 15 to 20% want full-time in the office. And so many leaders want full-time in the office, and they certainly don't want anyone to work remotely. This is a big problem, a big challenge. This is what's causing a key critical cause of the Great Resignation. So this is something that is a big problem. The employees insisting on this normal office return. It really shows bad business models in the pandemic and in the future of work. It will cause mass resignations, and it shows really bad gut decision making by employers. So this is something you need to be aware of. This gut decision making, if you've been checking out the Wise Decision Maker show for a while, you know that the gut is not the right way to make decisions. So don't make decisions in the same way that the Apple leadership was making, clearly not using data, clearly using their desire to go to the office to make ludicrously bad decisions. Obviously, it's a terrible idea to delay your office return only by a month with the surging of cases and Delta slated to peak in mid-late fall. So the gut decision making is something that we should avoid, and specifically there are judgment errors, dangerous judgment errors called cognitive biases that accompany our gut decision making. These are systematic errors of logic, of reason, of thoughtfulness, of goal achievement, productivity, efficiency, decision making, risk management that we all suffer from and that we all need to avoid. It causes leaders to put their employees' preferences aside and say, it doesn't matter what the employees want, I'll go ahead with what I want. So it leads to poor strategies like an Apple and lots of wasted resources. So what are these cognitive biases affecting leaders? Now, you want to be aware of three cognitive biases that are particularly important for the Delta surge. The normalcy bias is the most important one. Normalcy bias. We tend to greatly underestimate the disruptiveness of potential events that are problematic, that are charged, that don't feel good for us to acknowledge, like the possibility of a variant. So many people, so many leaders perceive vaccines as normal, as leading the way to normalcy and the future will be good, everything's fine, greatly underestimating the likelihood and the impact of major variants like Delta and other ones coming down the road. So you don't want to fall into the normalcy bias, you don't want to underestimate Delta itself and other variants going down the road. Now, another problem is making too optimistic plans. This is a tendency for all of us as human beings, including the very top leaders among us, like at Apple. So Apple making really bad plans, and that relates to cognitive bias called the planning fallacy. We intuitively want our plans to go right. We want everything to go well. We want to be successful. And we feel that we're good people, that we make good plans, and therefore we should succeed in our plans. That's the planning fallacy. We don't account for necessary resources for various problems that can go on, for various risks, nearly sufficiently. That's the planning fallacy. And the ostrich effect, it leads us to deny negative reality, just like Apple denied negative reality about the Delta surge. And so leaders make these mistakes too often. There was a study of 286 board members that fired their chief executive officers, and the board members were asked why they fired their chief executive officers, so 286, and one of the top reasons, 23% of the board members reported that their chief executive officer denied negative reality about the company. It's the ostrich effect. So probably Tim Cook at Apple will not be fired, but that's the kind of thing that leads to top executives being fired. To defend against these judgment errors, these cognitive biases, you need to use evidence-based practices, evidence-based best practices, and encourage everyone who you can influence to do so. Whether you're a leader or whether you are leading up, you want to encourage folks to use evidence-based best practices. It's not a good idea. It's pretty foolish to have a normal office return plan with the Delta surge. And it was obvious that already in early July that it was a bad idea. You want to use a hybrid first model with minority fully remote. So hybrid first model meaning most people are coming in for maybe a day a week in the office, maybe 2 days, and a minority, substantial minority, 10 to 30% are fully remote. That is really important because you want people to be able to go fully remote immediately. So if the Delta surge is getting worse, and indeed in some states like in Florida, you do not want to be working in the office. Some states it's not so bad yet, but some states where it's gotten really bad, like in Florida, you definitely don't want to be working in the office. That's why it's important for some members of your team to be working full-time remotely, so that you have that as part of your culture and as part of your risk management system, that you can immediately switch to a full-time remote schedule with minimal disruption. And if you have some people working full-time remotely at all times, that will help you make that happen. Well, that's what you need to know about why leaders deny reality in returning to the office with the Delta surge and how you can address that. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please click like and follow us and subscribe to us on whatever channel you've heard us. We have a video cast and a podcast, so you can YouTube, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts and video casts. There's going to be much more information in the show notes, so click on that. There's a blog, there's a lot of information, so scientific citations on all of these topics. And of course, I hope you will send me your questions. Love to hear them. So send them to me at Gleb, Gleb, at disasteravoidanceexperts.com. Again, Gleb at disasteravoidanceexperts.com, and I'll be happy to answer them. Don't answer every email, but I make sure to read all of them. All right, folks. I hope to see you at the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. And in the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.